In a day and age whereby a lot of the problems in the world are going to stem out of the Middle East, of course, it pays somewhat to have some understanding of what's going on out there in the Middle East and what the quarrel is all about. Of course, when you go into these quarrels, you go into the dead seawater of politics, and the average politician really does spout out of his mouth seawater, really. And you can't really swallow all of this, but at the same time, you understand, yeah, we're all in politics, whether we like it or not. But there's politics and there's spiritual realities entwined somewhat in politics, and the power struggle is largely for the physical world around us, as well as there's a spiritual element to all of this. So the important thing to do is get to who said what and what happened first in the courses of events and what unfolded and where we are now as a result of past history going way back, even in the land of Israel. Now, the land of Israel, as many would have gathered, have a very powerful history, and it's a spiritual history. So the root of the quarrel in the land of Israel has its roots in spiritual realities, in that God called Abraham. Abraham was called out of his country, and God saying to him that he would lead him eventually and his children, his people, to the promised land. And the promised land is now still there today, and this is the land of Israel. Therefore, you might assume, of course, who is the rightful heir to the throne there in the land of Israel. Because Abraham had children, there was Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Jacob had his name changed to Israel. Jacob had 12 children, the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. And so you have the land of Israel named after Jacob. Now, it's interesting to look into some of the background of St. Paul, because St. Paul, back in the days of early Christians, in the book of Acts, he gives his testimony as to the conversion of St. Paul, what changed him. Paul was very much a devout Jew because he had Jewish pride. And Jewish pride would suggest or say or outrightly, boldly state that God is a respecter of persons, that God has some special place in his heart for the children of Israel, and the rest of us are just Gentiles. Well, this appears to be Paul's mind, and I'm just going to quickly give Paul's testimony. So what changed St. Paul that changed the world? A large part of the New Testament written by St. Paul, and written by not only St. Paul, but written as from revelation, as he put it, his words, not mine, from Jesus Christ. So where did all this begin with St. Paul, and what was his mind? What was his mind before he became a Christian? So Paul clearly had a dramatic conversion from everything he'd been taught. He changes in an instant when Jesus appeared to him. And in his own words, he's saying this, not me, the King James Version of the Bible, in Acts chapter 22. And he's saying to his Jewish brethren, no doubt, because he starts off by saying men, brethren, and fathers. So he's trying to give a broad picture here. And hear ye my defence, which I make now unto you. So I guess Paul had been arrested here. And when they heard that he spake in the Hebrew tongue to them, they kept the more silence. And he saith, this is what Paul said, his words, not mine, in the King James Version of the Bible. This is somewhat his testimony of how he changed. Now, he had the view that the children of Israel were the apple of God's eye. Somehow or other they were special, and the rest of us were Gentiles. So you picture, well, you're kind of the apple of God's eye. Where does that lead me if I'm not Jewish by birth? Of course, this is going to make people feel, not very happy to be kind of second rate, second best, and all this sort of stuff with God, that somehow or other, if you're born of the lineage of the children of Israel, then you're of a special class of people. So kind of pride of race. And when they heard that he spake in the Hebrew tongue to them, so in verse 2, they kept them all silence, and he saith, Paul's words, not mine, King James Version, I am verily a man which am a Jew, so clearly he's a Jew, born in Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, yet brought up in this city at the feet of Gamaliel. So he was taught under one of the best teachers in Israel, in other words, and taught according to the perfect manner of the law of the fathers, and was zealous toward God, as ye all are this day. So he had he was zealous towards God. So where was he going wrong? He was on the right track in that, yes, you could say he was zealous towards God, but somehow or other he got his wires crossed. And he goes on, this is his testimony, and I persecuted this way unto the death. So he's persecuting Christians here, he's saying, and I persecuted this way, so zealous for God, so zealous about what he believed, that when these Christians came along and started challenging the status quo there in Israel, he gets these letters, and as it goes on to say, verse 4, and I persecuted this way, persecuted Christians unto the death, binding and delivering into prisons both men and women. As also the high priest doth bear me witness, and all the estate of the elders, from whom I received letters unto the brethren, and went to Damascus to bring them which were there bound unto Jerusalem for to be punished. So he was very strong about what he believed. And he'd been taught under one of the best teachers in Israel, Gamaliel. And so he goes on, he's binding and bounding and imprisoning Christians, verse 6, and it came to pass that that as I made my journey, and was come nigh unto Damascus about noon, suddenly there shone from heaven a great light round about me. So suddenly there's a spiritual intervention here coming from Jesus himself. Here's a man who's zealous for God. He's been taught under one of the best teachers in the land of Israel. So he has all of these letters. He's so zealous for his God. Anyone who dares to challenge the things that he believed in, he would have them rounded up and imprisoned. And I fell unto the ground. So he sees this great light. It came to pass that as I made my journey, was come nigh unto Damascus about noon, suddenly there shone from heaven a great light round about me. Suddenly there's an intervention here from the spiritual, and it's Jesus Christ. And I fell unto the ground and heard a voice saying unto me, So, why persecutest thou me? So, in other words, inasmuch as ye have done unto one of the least of these, my brethren, Jesus would say, ye have done unto me. So, as much as Paul was doing this unto the Christians, he was doing it unto Jesus. And I answered, Who art thou, Lord? And he said unto me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom thou persecutest. So here's a man zealous for God. He'd been taught by one of the best teachers in Israel, Gamaliel, and he's absolutely zealous for God, and yet he's going the wrong way. Suddenly Jesus appears to him, and this great light shone around him. He's knocked off of his high horse. And I answered, Who art thou, Lord? And he said unto me, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom thou persecutest. And they that were with me saw indeed the light, and were afraid, but they heard not the voice of him that spake to me. And I said, What shall I do, Lord? And the Lord said unto me, Arise and go into Damascus, and there it shall be told thee of all things which are appointed for thee to do. And when I could not see for the glory of that light, being led by the hand of them that were with me, I came into Damascus. So he was blinded by the light. He couldn't even see. He had to be led away by the hand. And I came unto Damascus. And one Ananias, a devout man according to the law, having a good report of all the Jews which dwell there, came unto me and stood and said unto me, Brother Saul, receive thy sight. And the same hour I looked up upon him. Suddenly his eyes are opened. And he said, The God of our fathers have chosen thee, that thou shouldest know his will, and see that just one, and shouldest hear the voice of his mouth. For thou shalt be his witness unto all men of what thou hast seen and heard. And now, why tarriest thou? Arise and be baptized, and wash away thy sins, calling on the name of the Lord. So here's a zealous man for God. And suddenly he's to call upon Jesus to have all of his sins washed away. And it came to pass that when I was come again to Jerusalem, even while I was praying in the temple, I was in a trance, and saw him saying unto me, Make haste. So Jesus suddenly appears to him again in this temple. Make haste and get thee quickly out of Jerusalem, for they will not receive thy testimony concerning me. So, in other words, Paul's Jewish brethren wouldn't receive his testimony. And I said, Lord, they know that I am imprisoned, and that I am imprisoned, and beat in every synagogue them that believed on thee. So now Jesus is sending Paul to the same people that he would beat and imprison. And he's saying, well, they won't receive me because they're going to think, well, we can't receive this man who's been imprisoning and beating other Christians. So he could see there could be a problem there. And when the blood of the martyr Stephen was shed, I also was standing by and consented unto his death, and kept the raiment of them that slew him. And he said unto me, Jesus says unto him, right, Depart, for I will send thee far hence unto the Gentiles. Well, here's Paul protecting the honour of the children of Israel, the honour of his faith, the honour of his people, the honour of his forefathers. And suddenly Jesus appears to him and says they won't receive you in Jerusalem. The Jews won't receive you, and sends him to the Gentiles. Now, this is no doubt one of the things that agitated St. Paul, that these Christians were preaching the gospel to both Jew and Gentile. So that's Paul's testimony. Suddenly he receives Jesus Christ, he has his eyes open, and then Jesus sends him to the Gentiles and tells him that the Jews wouldn't receive him, but the Gentiles would. So, respecter of persons, Jesus, you might say, favouring the Gentiles over the Jews. No, the gospel is for both Jew and Gentile, Paul goes on to say. Now, here's Paul in his own words, and I'm going to try to find the page here. And he's saying here, this is, again, Paul. And he's saying to the Christians of his day, we're in chapter 3, for this cause I, Paul, the prisoner of Jesus Christ, for you Gentiles. So he's talking to the Gentiles now, right? Talking to non-Jewish people. If ye have heard of the dispensation of the grace of God which is given me to you, Lord. So there's his testimony. There's Paul's testimony. We're in Galatians chapter 3. Verse 1-2, for this cause I, Paul, the prisoner of Jesus Christ, for you Gentiles. So he's talking to the Gentiles. if you have heard of the dispensation of the grace of God which is given me to you, would, how that by revelation. So clearly Paul was called by Jesus Christ himself. He tells him to get out of Jerusalem and go and preach to the Gentiles. And this is his message to the Gentiles. For this cause I, Paul, the prisoner of Jesus Christ for you Gentiles, if you have heard of the dispensation of the grace of God which is given me to you, would. So Jesus appears to him and gives him the grace of God. How that by revelation he made known unto me the mystery. Now, Paul was suddenly, a mystery was revealed to St. Paul, a mystery that had been hidden. Now, this is where people largely go wrong. Do we read the scriptures spiritually? Or do we, as Paul was once taught under Gamaliel, one of the best teachers in Israel, he appeared to be reading the scriptures in a more physical, seeing this in a physical non-light, as opposed to the true light. Well, the true light revealing to St. Paul that Paul was indeed persecuting Jesus Christ. Saul, he said. Paul's name was once Saul, as it name changed to Paul. Saul, why persecutest thou me? It is hard for thee to kick against the pricks. So in persecuting these Christians, he was persecuting Jesus. And now Jesus appears to him with this great blinding light, so much so that it blinds Paul's eyes. He has his eyes open, and then Jesus sends him to the Gentiles, saying to him, the Jews wouldn't receive thee, but the Gentiles would. So, for this cause I, Paul, the prisoner of Jesus Christ for you Gentiles, if you have heard of the dispensation of the grace of God which is given me to you, would, how that by revelation he made known unto me the mystery. Now here's a mystery. Suddenly Paul has his eyes further opened. Jesus appears to him and he's now shown a great mystery. A mystery that appeared to have been hidden right from the very beginning. So you have to have your eyes open spiritually. Paul himself saying here in Ephesians chapter 2, and you have he quickened. So Paul was quickened and otherwise made alive spiritually. So now he reads the scriptures, or he recalls his memory of all those scriptures that he was taught under Gamaliel in the Old Testament. Now he reads these scriptures spiritually as opposed to reading them merely in the flesh and seeing this as the physical history of the children of Israel, his people, and this understanding was more leading to his own understanding rather than leading to the understanding that comes from God. So he says in Ephesians chapter 2, and you hath he quickened, in other words, made alive spiritually. It's a case of whether we're reading the scriptures with spiritual eyes, or we're reading them with our own carnal, physical understanding and our own pride as coming from the history of his people as opposed to the history of other peoples, and him feeling that the Jews were the apple of God's eye and everyone else was somehow or other second-rate citizens and merely Gentiles or heathen or barbarians. So he goes on here in Ephesians chapter 2, and you hath he quickened, in other words, made alive spiritually, who were dead in trespasses and sins, as he was, wherein in time past ye walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh in the children of disobedience, as it once did in him, working in the children of disobedience in him the same true of St. Paul. Same true of many Christians, the same true of many learned men even. So Paul, a very zealous man for God, a very learned man, studying and getting his learning from Gamaliel, one of the top teachers in Israel, sitting at the feet of Gamaliel and understanding all these scriptures, and no doubt having much of this memorized, and somehow or other all of this was brought low by Jesus Christ himself, suddenly appearing to him. Paul not only seeing the light, but seeing the light and experiencing the light and hearing a voice speaking to him and saying, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou me? How could he have been so blind? Suddenly his eyes are open and he's not blind no more. Everything he taught, in fact, everything that he taught and what things were gained to me, he says, I counted as loss, yea, and do count them but dung, that I might gain Christ. So he felt that though he'd been taught a lot of good things, his motive for doing the will of God and his zeal for God was all the arm of the flesh and not the arm of the spirit. So Paul has a spiritual conversion. Suddenly now it's all about the arm of the Lord and the arm of Jesus Christ. It's all about showing the world Jesus and not leaning to his own understanding. In all thy ways now he's going to acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. So Ephesians chapter 2, and you have he quickened, made alive spiritually. This is the difference. Are we going to read the scriptures spiritually? Or are we going to read these scriptures with our own understanding, with our own arm and our own carnal mind, and our eyes closed to the spiritual? Well, and you have he quickened, in other words, made alive spiritually, who were dead in sins and trespasses and sins, where in time past ye walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air. So the devil, no doubt, exploiting all of this, the devil, the prince of the power of the air, directing St. Paul to persecute Christians. Why? To protect the honour of Jewish people somehow or other. He'd got it in his head that God was a respecter of persons. God is not a respecter of persons. Even John the Baptist had the same problem. They were coming to him and saying, Abraham is our father. In other words, we are the children of Abraham. But John's answer to them was, God is able of these stones to make children unto Abraham. So what makes you so special, John the Baptist would be saying? You're saying you're so special because you're one of the children of Israel. God is no respecter of persons. God can take a stone and make this into one of the children of Israel. In other words, he would say to them, you're no more special than a stone. If God can take a stone and make that stone into one of the children of Israel, what makes you so special? Nothing. God is not a respecter of persons. And you have he quickened, who are dead in trespasses and sins, where in times past ye walked according to the course of this world. This is the course of the world for St. Paul. According to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that now worketh with the children of disobedience, among whom we all had our conversation in times past, in the lusts of our flesh, fulfilling the desire of the flesh and of the mind. So is Paul doing, fulfilling the desire of the flesh and of his mind, in that he was a devout, zealous Jew. Among whom also we had our conversation in times past, as did St. Paul, as many others do, with the problem of their lust of the flesh. In the lust of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature the children of wrath, even as others. But God, who is rich in mercy, for his great love wherewith he loved us, even when we were dead in sins, hath quickened us, in other words, made us alive spiritually, hath quickened us together with Christ. By grace ye are saved. It's all by grace. Grace, in other words, gift received at Christ's expense, given to you by grace. And have raised us up together and made us sit together in heavenly places in Christ Jesus, that in ages to come he might show the exceeding riches of his grace and his kindness towards us through Christ Jesus. For by grace, this is what saves us, not that you're of some special race, not that you're of some special bloodline. For by grace are ye saved, through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. So in other words, St. Paul was on a works trip. He was going out and rounding up all of these Christians, a zealous Jew, no doubt on a works trip with the arm of the flesh, his own understanding, how he chose to see things, which put him in a great position as opposed to a low position. He wasn't humbling himself in the sight of the Lord, and he shall lift thee up. He was exalting his own arm and his own mind and his own self and his own people in persecuting Christians. So Paul's sin was made manifest when Jesus revealed to him the mystery that had been hidden. Now, Paul was given a mystery that had been hidden from the foundation of the world, as he goes on to say. Not by works, lest any man should boast, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus unto good works, which God hath before ordained that we should walk in them. So Paul had been ordained to preach the gospel, not only to the Jews, but also to the Gentiles. Wherefore, remember ye, being in times past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision of the flesh made by hands, that at that time ye were without Christ, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers from the covenant of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. But now in Christ Jesus, ye who were sometimes afar off are made nigh by the blood of Christ. For he is our peace, who have made us both one, not just like one better than the other, we're one. Jew and Gentile are equal, we are all one. And for he is our peace, who have made both one, and have broken down the middle wall of partition between us, having abolished in his flesh the enmity, even the law of commandments contained in the ordinance, to make in himself of twain one new man, so making peace, and that he might reconcile both unto God in one body by the cross, having slain the enmity thereby, and came and preached peace to you which were afar off, and to them that were nigh. For through him we both have access by one Spirit unto the Father. Now therefore ye are no more strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints and of the household of God, and are built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Jesus Christ himself being the chief cornerstone, in whom all the building fitly framed together groweth unto an holy temple in the Lord, in whom ye also are builded together for an habitation of God through the Spirit. So we're all one. In other words, he goes on to say, for this cause I, Paul, the prisoner of Jesus Christ, for you Gentiles, if ye have heard of the dispensation of the grace of God which is given me to you, Lord, how that by revelation. Now here's Paul's revelation. Paul's now preaching to the Gentiles. He's also preaching to the Jews. He's preaching to Jews and Gentiles. And he's saying that the middle wall of partition has been broken down between us. One isn't better than the other just because you're born of this bloodline or that bloodline or this nation or that nation. This doesn't matter anymore. We're all one. We're all equal. God is no respecter of persons. We're all equal. We're all one. This is Paul's message to both Jew and Gentile. In Jesus Christ breaking down the middle wall of partition, one isn't better than the other. In God's eyes, we're all equal. God is not a respecter of persons. One isn't better than the other. So for this cause I, Paul, the prisoner of Jesus Christ, for you Gentiles, if you have heard the dispensation of the grace of God which is given me to you, Lord, how that by revelation. Well, what is Paul's revelation? What is his message to both Jew and Gentile? So he preaches to both Jew and Gentile, and Jesus has sent him clearly unto the Gentiles. How that by revelation he made known unto me the mystery. Well, here's the mystery. What is this mystery? God's revealed a mystery to you, St. Paul. What is it? You've seen this light on the road to Damascus. You were going out persecuting Christians. You had this zeal for God. You had this great pride. You had your own understanding. You'd memorized many scriptures in the Old Testament. You'd learned under one of the greatest teachers in Israel. You had this great zeal for God. And suddenly these Christians come along and were challenging the status quo. What is the status quo that they were challenging, that somehow or other the Jews were better, that they were the apple of God's eyes and they were special and everyone else was somehow or other second-rate citizens with God, that God had some special place in his heart, some special corner that the Jews had with God, and everybody else was somehow or other second-rate citizens. This was never going to sit well with Christians, was it? So, but on the other hand, are Christians better than Jews? No, in God's eyes, we're all equal. So, for how that by revelation he made known unto me the mystery. Now, this is Paul saying he's speaking by revelation. So, in other words, he sees Jesus on the road to Damascus. He clearly hears Jesus' voice. Jesus, no doubt, goes on to speak to him about many things. And he's given this revelation, this mystery that had been hidden. Now, there's a mystery hidden in the scriptures, he's saying, and people read them either carnally, with their own understanding, or we read them spiritually. And if we read them spiritually, as St. Paul, suddenly this mystery, his eyes were opened, and he can see something that people hadn't quite seen. And you have many preachers today, zealous for Israel, saying Israel is the apple of God's eye. Talking about the land of Israel, how the land of Israel was given to the Abraham, Isaac and Jacob and the children of Israel.